There we go. All right. Okay. Thank you to LES executives for being here for our pre-council today. We'll go ahead and get started in a moment.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you for your time. I realize some of you have busy schedules right now. This will be a little bit redundant to what we're going to be doing obviously later, but this is usually kind of that little more informal environment, so you guys can get deeper into details in the weeds if you'd like. You all know Emily Keeney, who is our CFO.
Welcome, Emily.
And I think from there, we're ready to go.
Yep.
Okay.
I can get my slides going, I think. I'm waiting on
It takes a moment sometimes. Yeah. There we go.
There we go.
Takes a second. And you've all met our city attorney, of course.
Yes.
You'll have to now. Yeah. Thank you for being here, Mr. Christie. It just takes. Oh.
What's that?
We're seeing your laptop screen, we're not seeing your power.
Is it on our end or?
It's your issue.
Okay.
You're not seeing me change slides right
Okay.
now.
Just see the blue window.
Okay. I think it's.
Ours. Okay.
Somebody
We'll
was
get
supposed
some.
to do something, I think.
We'll get some assistance.
Move it around.
This is why we scheduled it for an hour instead of half an hour.
It's always the technology.
Yeah. It's great when it works.
Yeah.
We'll get it going here. Johansi went to get some help.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Bo had said somebody would switch something.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Austin.
It'll just take a, yep. They're back there, so I'm sure they're. Yes, they don't want us to know. Here he comes.
They even put signs up here that says, please don't
Do not-
move the mice.
I see that.
We always like turning this way.
Stop it, don't touch the stuff.
Yeah. There we go.
The 6, what'd you do?
Thank you, Bo.
And then it's.
Perfect.
It's the secret.
It is. Thank you, Bo. All
Well,
right.
Thank you for having us. So I'm going to step through the presentation. It's the same slide deck as Kevin mentioned that we're going to use later today. Oh, there. Sorry about that. It's the same slide deck that we'll use later, but feel free to jump in, ask me questions as we're going through, and we can expand on some things in this session. But first off, so as you know, we're seeking a rate increase for 2023. As we pulled the budget together after we had implemented some mitigation strategies and made some reductions, we still had a 13.2% deficit in our budget. That's the equivalent of a 4.8% rate increase. And so there's two main factors that are driving that. One is our net power costs, so power or costs to get power to the service area offset by any wholesale revenue, but then also transmission expenses going up 9.6 million as well. So I'm going to jump in on those few things in the next few slides, but kind of to step back just a little bit, when we pull the budget together, so we are focused first on our financial metrics to make sure that we can maintain our AA rated or AA rating for our bonds. That allows us to borrow money at low interest rates. A lot of our financing mechanisms, the pricing for those are driven by being a highly rated utility. And so when we pulled that information together, you can see in the left-hand column there that we were not meeting, if the metric is in red, we were not meeting the target that we've established that would allow us to continue to be a AA rated utility. So the one that's in the box there is the one that really is driving the need for the rate increase. Standard & Poor's has told us that in order to maintain that rating, we need to have a 1.4 times fixed charge coverage. Now, what that is really just how many times over can you cover your fixed obligations of the utility after you've paid all of your expenses. So things like debt service, fixed power cost obligations through power purchase agreements, and things like that. So we were far below that when we pulled the budget together. And so really that's what's driving the need to implement the rate increases, not only to pay the bills, but then also to make sure we can maintain that AA bond rating.
And because this chart is not super clear.
Oh, sure.
When you say we were far below that, were you at 1.2?
Yes, yes.
You might want to describe debt service coverage
Oh,
as
sure.
well.
Yep. So debt service coverage is another metric that we monitor, and the bond rating agencies monitor that as well. And it really is how many times over you can pay just your long-term principal and interest payments of your bonds after you've paid for your operating expenses. And so that's another one that we've focused on in the past. We've generally targeted being at 2 times coverage. That puts you in the range of a AA rated bond or AA bond rating. But what's become more important over the past few years is that fixed charge coverage from Standard & Poor's. And generally, if you can get that one up to the 1.4, you're going to be over 2 times coverage. And so you can see that that's why that one is at 211 when you implement the rate increase.
Now, one of the things I think it's also important is that if you think about that, you're saying, well, so you have enough money left over to pay your debt service coverage twice. That's our mortgage payment, if you will. And it's what, $55 million, plus or minus?
Just under that, yep.
So what are you doing with that extra $55 million? And that's how we cash fund capital. So that's kind of that balance with respect to what happens. Because I think sometimes people think later on, well, wait a minute, if there's that much money, what are you doing with it? Well, that's basically how we fund our capital.
Capital and our payment in lieu of tax comes out of that amount as well. So, and really, I should mention too, there's a lot of things that the rating agencies look at when they look at the financial strength of LES to keep that bond rating. You know, the strength of the management team, the generation diversity, and things like that, as well as the ability to get rate increases when you need them. I wanted to mention that one because it's particularly important this year. Both rating agencies, Fitch and S&P, that we are rated by, have come out and said, we're going to be watching you. Times are tough right now, costs are increasing, and we want to make sure that you are able to get rate increases when you need them. That's a demonstration of financial strength as well. So this slide just is a visualization of the things that are impacting our operating budget. You can see that the last year's budget was $247.7 million. The 2 main drivers are in that box there, which I mentioned previously, the power cost increases as well as the transmission increases, and that's 80% of the increase in the operating budget. We have staffing and payroll changes, which is about 3% increase over the prior year for payroll. Vegetation management, that's another big part of our budget, just clearing the lines, making sure they're safe, reliable. The costs for that are increasing, contracted costs, as well as needing additional crews to do that work. And then all the other things are in that 2.8 million. Lots of ups and downs within the budget, but that's really some inflationary factors that are causing pressures on the rest of our budget. So the routine things that we do to maintain the system, a lot of those costs are increasing as well. But the bulk of it is those 2 things that are highlighted in the box there. Sure.
Tell us a little bit, why are the transmission costs? Are those the fixed cost on the lines, or?
I have another slide coming up, and just after this next one, that'll be the transmission side. So just quickly to give you a little bit of a visualization too on what piece of the pie power cost is for our entire operating budget. It's over 50%. So just like to emphasize that, payroll and benefits is about 20%. Some of those day-to-day operations are 12%. Depreciation, which is really a non-cash item, is in there as well. Transmission costs, which is a bigger piece for 2023 than it has been, but really power cost is the main driver. But hitting on the transmission expense. So the story on this one is when LES joined Southwest Power Pool in 2009, shortly thereafter, like in 2012, a study was done that determined that LES wasn't receiving the benefit for its investment in the transmission infrastructure in the system. So they started providing us a credit every year. And so we got that for 11 years. And we've known it was going to go away in 2023, that 2022 would be the last year we would get it. And so we've had it in our financial model. We've seen it coming. We knew that we would likely have a rate increase in 2023 when that happened. Unfortunately, it's been layered on top of other cost increases at the same time that we were somewhat unforeseen, power cost increases, inflationary costs, those sorts of things. So our philosophy is not to raise rates before we need to. And so that's why we didn't start collecting monies in advance of this credit going away. But unfortunately, the timing just worked out that instead of having a 2.5% increase, it's closer to 5%. So does that help? Okay. Just a few ways that we continue to help people in the community through the Sustainable Energy Program. The funding for that is budgeted at 1.5 million, just as it was in 2022. There's a little bit of programming changes for that. We had a consultant in earlier this year that's given us a little bit more direction on what programming might be most beneficial for LES and customers as well. And then also the Energy Assistance Program, where we provide funding to Community Action Program, and they disperse those funds to those that struggle to pay their bill. And that's calculation of that amount is based in LES board resolution. And so as we have additional customers and as we have rate increases, that amount increases. So it's increased a little bit over the prior year. The capital budget is up 9.1 million. So it's 55.3 million. You can see in the chart there kind of the distribution of the types of projects that are included in the budget, heavily weighted with underground distribution and power supply type projects. But there's two main items that are causing the increase as compared to 2022. We have additional underground distribution projects. That's increased scope, but also pricing. So some of those inflationary pressures are hitting this budget as well. And then we have some projects at Terry Bundy Generating Station and Laramie River Station as well. So just to touch on it once again, I know I keep mentioning it, but there's a lot of supply chain issues and inflationary things that are impacting the budget. We've had significant delays in getting transformers for substations. We've had to delay some projects, and so that's pushing some of our projects into 2023. We also did an analysis of our budget to look at those things that are routine in nature that we do every year, to try and assess what is the inflationary impact on those things. And we estimate that it's about a 7.8% increase on just the routine services purchases that we make. And that's about a $3 million increase in the budget just from those items. I mentioned the vegetation management costs, and then also just as a point of reference, we have the CPI for electricity was 15.5% for September. That was the latest number I had when I pulled this together, but that just gives you kind of a frame of reference for the pressures that are on the utility industry.
But that 7% was really just on the operating budget, not
Right.
the capital budget.
Yes.
So, for example, distributed transformers are going almost twice as much as they were. Substation transformers almost twice as much over the last few years. So it's significant in the capital budget.
Explain the acronym CPI.
Oh, sure. Consumer Price Index. Yes. I'm
Probably that was one of ours.
trying not to have acronyms, but it doesn't always work out sometimes. So that is a summary of the costs in the budget. And so moving on to the rate increase, if there are any questions at this point, when we break down the just history kind of LES rate increases. So if you look over the last 10 years, our annual increases average less than 1%. In fact, last year we had a small rate decrease. And so even with this 4.8%, we're under 1%. So pretty affordable. It's unfortunate that we have this rate increase, but generally speaking, pretty affordable rates over that time frame. So we set our rates for individual classes based on the cost to serve each class. And generally we target plus or minus 5% of the cost to serve them. So you can see here what the 2023 cost of service percentages are for each class as compared to what they were the prior year. And so this also shows the rate increases for each class, and you can see that they vary. And the reason that they vary is for that cost of service percentage, what we're trying to target. And so one of the things that we were trying to achieve when we knew that we needed a system-wide 4.8% rate increase was to have the residential class, if we could make it work, be 4.8%, because that is 130,000 of our 140,000 customers. And so the communication would be pretty difficult if it's a number that's larger than what you're saying the system-wide rate increase is. You can see that it caused them to drop slightly in their cost of service percentage, but they're still within the band of 95 to 105% cost of service. Another one to point out, heating service, that's a small group of customers, but you can see that their increase is 6%, but you can see how far under they are paying currently for cost of service, and so we're trying to move them a little bit more quickly to get in that band that we're targeting. Conversely, for large light and power, their increase is 3.9%, but they're paying more than the cost to serve them at this point. Less than they were last year, though, so we're making progress to bring them into that band and get them a little bit closer. So this is kind of the art of things when we set the rates. If we tried to strive to be at 100% cost of service for each class, we'd have wide variations in rates each year, so there's a little bit of trying to have stability for customers as well.
What was that range you gave?
5%, so 95 to 105%.
The lighting, is that primarily City of Lincoln?
Yes, 95% of the lighting class is City of Lincoln. And so that one, we're working a plan that we've communicated with the city on as far as bringing them closer. There you can see they're quite a bit under the cost to serve them. That's comes about because of the LED conversion and not because it costs more, just because of the way that we were charging for the maintenance of the poles, essentially. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect. And when the whole system changed out to a different type of light, our rate structure wasn't equipped to handle that. So we're trying to slowly move that a little bit closer. And so the increase for just street lighting, this is like traffic lighting and all kinds of lighting is grouped into here together. But the street lighting maintenance costs are 9.75% increase. And we think by about 2028, they'll be within the band of cost of service. And so we've been working with the city.
You might want to clarify where a lot of those costs are, though, because it's
within the pole,
yeah,
or the maintenance of the pole. So even though the lamp head was changed out or the light was changed out, the costs, 80% of the cost for each street light is in the pole and the distribution system to serve it. So that's why the disconnect a little bit. Overall, the bill is less for the city, for sure. Okay, so focusing just on residential customers. So we continue to do rate restructuring, which we've talked to you about in the past, but that's trying to make sure that we are recovering the fixed costs of the utility in fixed charges on a residential bill, because if we don't do that, then we're exposed to financial risk that as customers use less energy, that we might not be recovering all of our costs. And so this rate proposal includes both a 4.8% rate increase, but then also a little bit of restructuring between the energy rate and the facilities rates, energy being a variable rate, facilities levels being a fixed charge on the bill. So you can see that the monthly changes in the facilities levels there, and then some minor increases in energy. No changes in the customer charge. This is a little bit hard to get your mind around, so it's helpful to show what it actually means in this table. So we've shown 2 customers in each facilities level, and a low user and a higher user in each level, and what their bill change would be per month. So this gives you a little bit better context on the changes that we're considering. And you know, that top one there, I think it's about an 8% increase, but typically that's not a home. That's going to be like a pool or a shed or something like that. The 100 kilowatt hours per month is not sustainable as a residence typically. So those are pretty low users.
And the average customer is roughly?
Oh, yep, about 800 to 900 kWh. So they'll be right about $5 per month increase. And this is a distribution that shows that. So just to kind of gut check ourselves as we're going through this, we like to run this. This is literally every bill that was in the system at the time. We do a simulation on what each customer's bill will be with this rate increase. And you can see that most annual changes will be less than $60 per month for most residential customers. We also do that for general service customers. It's our next one of the bigger classes as well, kind of small to mid-sized businesses, but 85% of that class will have 6% or less increase in their bill, as well as large light and power. So our largest customers will see increases that are less than 4%. So this chart is one of my favorites. So it shows on the bottom line there, that's the LES all-in cost per kilowatt hour for our rates. It's compared to Nebraska in the red line, and then the U.S. average in the blue. We only have data from the Energy Information Administration through 2021. And so that's why those red and blue lines drop off. But you can see, even with this proposed rate increase, LES will still be below what Nebraska was in 2021. So we don't know for sure what all the other utilities are doing, but we're confident that we're still going to be very competitive, and certainly very competitive as it relates to the industry or the national average as well.
You You go, I'm sorry, go. I was going to say, you might recall that we have historically done a basically a national rate study. And we now have actually changed up. We still do one, but it's actually much more comprehensive, and it's using all EIA data, so it's kind of eliminated some of how tedious it was for us to try to gather data. It was getting hard to get. But the interesting thing of that, all that data is on our website, so you could, in most cases, find a city or something close to, if you know somebody that lives somewhere, and see how we compare with respect to that. Let's see, that one, we ended up being 15th?
Yes, I think that's
I
right.
think 15th
Yes, yep.
overall nationally
Yes.
with the lowest rates. But it also looks at reliability and affordability as well, so you can kind of get a feel for that. And that's kind of a new trend that's happening with respect to looking at rates. So it's not just simply how much your rate is per kilowatt hour, but is it affordable depending upon what your region is. And so we obviously we fare very well. In fact, it was even lower there.
Yep. Third for reliability, and I think it was eighth maybe for
Eighth
affordability.
best
yeah.
for affordability.
Maybe.
So all that data is online as well.
Yep. So.
I give you just
Sure.
a small tip,
Yep.
because so many of us have reached the point where small numbers.
Yeah.
When you get to 2023 or so, if you would just say the number out
Oh,
loud,
sure.
so folks would be able to tell.
Yes, because
Even
it looks like it's the same. Yeah.
I get that, but we're lower at 879. we're
Yes.
lower.
Yep, and lower than 893. I can do that. Yes.
Okay.
I'm actually struggling here as we stand here because I can't see this monitor because I'm not far enough back. I'm also having eye troubles. Yep. Right.
Yeah, okay.
Nothing to
Brought
do
my
with age.
reading glasses. No, but whoops.
Thank you.
Yep. So then wanted to touch a little bit too on a new rate that we're proposing for 2023. It's a large customer time of use rate. And so this is to, there's several reasons to do this. One, that we've had interest from potential customers as well as our existing customers to implement something like this. But it's also supportive of our decarbonization goal. And so the intent is that we financially incentivize large customers to shift all or a portion of their demand off of LES's peak. And so that benefits us because we have to build the next generating unit based on what our peak demand is, and certain of the costs that we pay for Southwest Power Pool are dependent on that. So if we can keep that peak lower, it's beneficial to us. And so providing a financial incentive that makes sense is something that we want to do. It's not a pilot, but we're just trying it with our large customers to get a little bit of history on it, get some experience with it, see what the uptake is on it. But it does provide customers, we did kind of a sampling, not knowing exactly what customers might be able to do, but they could see 1% to 2% perhaps savings on their bill if they could move just 5% of their peak demand off of our peak. Those are some of the largest customers, but we'll see as we hopefully unveil that, what kind of customers would take advantage of that.
It is significant. This makes me think of the field trip that I think it was Richard and I were on this field trip for water, and our electricity up there comes out of Omaha, and we were on the off-peak and they got rid of it. And so I'm sort of curious, they got rid of off-peak pricing. And I'm curious why you're interested in going to off-peak pricing.
I'm guessing this is a guess, mind you, but they've had this huge influx of these really high load factor loads. The data centers, they've got Facebook, they've got maybe even one Google and another one under construction. So those would be substantially raising the overall load factor, and it likely would make it harder to come up with an economic way to see if you can move that. I'm just guessing.
Raise the city's utility bill about $1 million to go from the off-peak rate.
Which you didn't use our number for the national average either.
Oh,
I'm glad I'm nerd enough to remember that.
oh, you mean, so the difference between
Right.
being in, now you're gonna, I have that back here somewhere, but, so I believe you correct me if I'm wrong, but this back on this chart here, if you look at what LES residential customers pay on that rate versus being at the national average, That's about $45 million
difference.
benefit to the city of Lincoln versus paying the national average. So we view that as economic development at its best. I mean, it's getting money and,
It's
keeping the
that's-
money with the
it's-
customers.
It's our customers' money being able to go into the economy, not going to their energy bill
Yep.
compared to the national average. We think, when you think about economic development, what we bring into the community, I mean, that's our real material, not counting, of course, our large customers.
Yeah.
So.
And we estimate, and there is a difference too between Lincoln and Omaha even, which is around 20 million, I think, as far as the difference between paying LES's rates versus OPPD rates just here.
On
here in
residential.
Lincoln. On residential, yep.
Whoa.
Right.
You are being recorded.
So just wanted to share a little bit too about, all the different ways that we try and get the messaging out about our budget and our rates. We've had quite the roadshow. We've been out in the community quite a bit, sharing the message, taking feedback from customers. We had a public meeting. I will say most of these outlets and meetings were pretty not
Boring.
really attended. Yeah, right.
Did you say
Yeah.
boring?
In fact, when we look back, even through our key account representatives as they reach out to customers and all of the meetings where we log questions and comments, we haven't received any negative feedback. And so most of the time it's thanks for the information. We suspect it's thanks, glad it's not more. I think given the nature of the economy right now, that something less than 5% is, is welcome news. And so, but we have made attempts to get the messaging out. So.
I've been saying that, not to give anything away, I've been doing this for over 45 years at 3 different utilities. I've seen lots of different rate increases. I've never seen one that 5% didn't get some feedback. It's actually pretty amazing, but I think, unfortunately, it's probably just a function of the times we're in with respect to the economy right now. But
So, for your consideration, we do have 2 resolutions. One for the budget, and so that it's $330 million. That's up about $31 million from last year. So the resolution provides for you to approve that budget, but then also provides the ability for us to reimburse ourselves down the road through tax-exempt financing for capital expenditures. We have to do that or we're not able to look back 18 months and grab those expenditures and issue when the timing is right in the market to issue long-term debt for that. And then it provides continued eminent domain authority for us. Additionally, there's a retail rates resolution that provides for adopting the 4.8% system-wide rate increase, the revenue neutral changes that I described as far as rate restructuring for residential customers, the large light and power time of use rates, and then there's just clarifying minor wording changes that we identify as we go through the year, things that could read better in our rate schedules and be more clear to customers. Next, though, just a little bit of explanation. So when we sent our packet over to the city clerk, one of our an ordinance related to the financing resolution got missed in the packet. So ideally, we were going to talk to you about that today, but the timing for that, getting its first reading, is actually today instead of last week,
I saw that,
because
yeah.
it didn't make its way in 2020. We had 2 series that we issued that year to issue some taxable bonds to refund tax-exempt debt, and we got really fantastic savings by doing that. And then we issued some new money in the later part of the year too. And so what happened then is we actually used up all of our authorization, and most of it was refinancing. So it isn't new money; it's just the ability to, like refinance your mortgage, kind of. But so at that point, at the end of 2020, we sought to get additional authorization through the end of 2022, but we haven't issued any bonds. Our bonds are at such low interest rates that there really isn't anything that we can do too much as far as refinancing. But you never know. But it's,
Yeah.
Yep.
Next question I just have to ask, what would be the scenario that would cause you to need to issue, given the fact that these rates are much higher than they were?
Yeah. So it would probably be something that maybe we're not yet conceiving of that would be a large capital project. If something
I was
were
going to
come
say,
up.
I think probably the most obvious thing would be something that would be driven if we, in the next couple of years, if Agate or someone went forward, and that was going to mean that we had to get out, for example, I'm not saying we couldn't do this on deferred, but just as an example, And we had to have a lot more capacity, and we had to build some gas turbines, like OPPD is having to do right now because of these same kind of customers. And let's say we had to get an order in because of the supply chain issues to make sure we were hitting it. It may mean that we would have to be out in the capital markets to do that. Hopefully, we'd have enough time to be able to go through a longer process if we needed to do that, because it would take planning and everything to be able to get a bid like that out. But we're seeing such weird things in supply chain now, and these whole issues with respect to there's more than one of the agate-style folks out there that are very, very large customers that will drive us to make some kinds of changes if, in fact, they go forward. So.
And I would add, too, if we were in a situation like that, the other thing that comes into play if you're trying to issue bonds is you need to do the timing right so that you're not in the market at the same time that other issuers are. You know, so some of that is the flexibility to be able to say, wait, there's a large issuance coming from, you know, Los Angeles or some bigger issuer than us. We need to be able to be flexible and adjust when we go to market. So that's what this authorization provides for us, is just a little bit to be a little bit more nimble, like Kevin mentioned. So.
Other questions or comments on this particular?
Nope,
Yeah.
This is it, actually.
On the yes.
I do have a question about slide number 15.
Doesn't it all make your head hurt?
Totally unintentional.
Sorry.
The word you used was, you said annual and monthly in the same statement.
Oh, then I probably just misspoke.
Annually $60, monthly something
Oh,
else, and I
yeah.
got confused on.
What I meant to say, which isn't necessarily what I said, was that the annual changes for residential customers would be on average about $60 per year or about $5 per month. So, yep. Yes, yep. Does it make sense?
It struggled with it. Average.
Per year, yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I do have a couple of notes I meant that are not directly related to the budget. One of them is, and I think you all have seen that we went through a year-long integrated resource planning process. If you all would like a presentation on that, we'd be happy to do it. But even though the board has approved it, we're continuing to meet with people about that. In fact, we'll be at the PRB. We met with the chair of the Natural Resources Committee last week. But the good news is, and I think the thing that would be of a lot of interest to you all, is when the board adopted the 2040 net zero CO2 goal from our generation facilities, and we'd be talking about that, one of the things we commonly said is we don't know how we're going to do it. Board set the goal. It's the most aggressive goal of the utilities in the state. And so we weren't sure how we were going to get there, but that's the goal. Going through that resource planning process, we actually have identified a pathway to do that with what we know about what available technology is. And so that's actually in part the answer to your question. We're going to be out looking to develop 170 megawatts worth of solar starting now. And again, there's all the constraints that you might guess go with that. There's trying to find the property, trying to address supply chain issues and those things. It'll be a long process. It's not going to happen this year or probably even next year, but it's something that we're going to be out there doing. But it fills in some of the pieces we're looking at to be able to hit that decarbonization goal. So we'd be happy to meet with you all on that when you've got some time and the ability to probably give us about an hour probably to do that. And the second piece is I wanted to kind of update you on the supply chain issues that are really significant with respect to particularly the development community right now. We have been dealing with this probably now for about a year and a half and making mitigation to address this issue. It's becoming, for our entire industry, basically quite critical with respect to distribution transformers. We have been fortunate to be able to do some things like we're not retiring as many transformers, we're doing more refurbishment. There's a lot of different things we're doing. The last thing, and we actually took the board back, we've got some mock-ups that we have built in our training center, is we may end up setting poles in underground distribution areas and putting transformers up that are overhead. So we go underground, up, and then back down. Because we do have a number of overhead transformers. We had some special projects that were going on, changing out some that had some PCB levels of contamination. Not critical levels, but they were enough that if in fact you had a spill from a storm or something, then you'd had to do this massive cleanup. So it was a risk mitigation. So we had a bunch of those transformers come in. We stopped doing those change-outs. So we have a bunch of overhead transformers. It's painful trying to get pad-mounted transformers. That's particularly serious for when you have these very large commercial, like cancer centers and these different things coming in. So we're still really fighting hard for that. The delivery time used to be between 6 and 12 weeks for distribution transformers. Now it's over a year and a half. Some utilities report they're getting estimates of 3 years. And for substation transformers, the really big ones, they are 3-year delivery at this point. And as you might guess, particularly in the development community, historically the developers don't say, oh, I'm going to build something and I need the power in 2 years. That's typically not the way it's been done. So we've been doing a lot of communication there as well. But it is a significant issue. Many cities and utilities have actually stopped supporting development. They just can't do it. They can't do that and make sure they're keeping appropriate, basically transformers in stock to be able to serve their existing customers if there's a catastrophic type of event. So that's just a heads up. We're working on that issue. We're hopefully going to stay ahead of it, but it's got a lot of challenges associated with it. That does not mean we're not having a lot of supply chain issues with lots of other things as well. That's the most critical for us, but it's true of conduit, cable, meter sockets, a whole variety of things.
So how does that, this is sort of related, Kevin, but LES was doing the underground bearing of cable program. Does that affect, does the supply chain,
It has slowed it down a little bit. We're actually, at the next board meeting, we're going to be doing a report for the next phase of the discretionary underground program. Okay. And we have gotten a little bit of delays off of that this year, so some of the stuff we were planning on doing this year is actually moved forward to next year. But we're doing quite a bit better on cable and conduit than transformers, so if it doesn't involve doing too much in pad mount transformers, doesn't have as much impact on schedule. So
where do the transformers come from?
All of the distribution transformers that we use are domestic.
Okay.
But there's only about 5 major, and unfortunately, virtually all the substation transformers are offshore. There's only about 5 major transformer manufacturers now, and I'll give you an example. I had a conversation. There's one of the electric G&Ts in the country actually owns one of the major distribution transformer companies, and I was talking to the CEO about different ideas about it, and he was giving the example. He said, we would add a third shift if we could, and they apparently serve 20 or 25% of the market. And he said, we can't get the people.
The workers,
he said they need 600 to 700 people, and they're in a community of 40,000. And he said there just aren't the people to do it. Mm-hmm. And so we have an industry group that's working with the Department of Energy and actually co-opted the White House into this as well, trying to come up with ways so that this does not end up to be, the baby formula issue for everyone. And the president has approved use of the Defense Production Act, but we're all kind of challenged to figure out what do you use the DPA to fix. It's really challenging. You can't turn a toaster manufacturer into a transformer manufacturer. Right. And so we're trying to figure out what ways, and there's some ideas about using maybe risk mitigation, having the government do some backstopping, if you will, to expansion of factories, but you still have that labor issue. I don't know if anybody watched 60 Minutes the other night, but talking about the whole issue with respect to immigration and you've got all these people that can't work because they don't have work visas. They're here, but they can't work. And then it takes them 9 months to a year to be able to get, approved to work. So there's got to be some things that can be done. This group we set up, a small group to be dealing with DOE to do that, actually did go to the Department of Labor, but quite candidly didn't get much help. So we're trying to figure out ways to do that from an industry perspective, but it's a significant issue for us. So. And by the way, if another hurricane hits, and it hits Florida, I think they went through most of the transformers they had on the first round. I don't know what they're going to do the second time. So,
yeah, fingers crossed. I think, does someone else have a question? I think the first time I heard about the transformer shortage was at Home Builders Association meeting, a small group meeting. they were not complaining. They were very empathetic, actually, for LES.
And they're having the same problems
Yep.
between labor and supply
Yes,
chain
they
that we
are.
are. So.
They are. So, any other questions or comments from the council or for?
Oh, right, on the budget and rates, the vote is on the 21st.
Right, it lays
Yep.
over 2 weeks.
Yes, yep,
Correct.
yep.
Just as a reminder, right. Mhm.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney, Legal Counsel. Right, right, we appreciate your counsel. Thank you very much. Thank you both so much.
Thank you all for your
Thank
time. Appreciate it.
Likewise.
We'll
Thanks.
be back in just a
Yes.
little bit.
See you at 3 o'clock, yes.
Yeah.
Vending machines in the hall. Yeah. I wish we had a fine dine place to put you.
All you do is just down the street.
Yeah, that's right, that's true. Thank you very much. This will conclude our pre-council.